My name is Jason Lott. I lead the product operations function here at Bonterra. Bonterra has been around for roughly about 5 years now. We're focused on nonprofit software that is here to increase the greatest good. We say that because our focus when we look at the clients that we're trying to bring onto the platform is nonprofits that are in the social good space. And so this could be everything from environmental causes to animal welfare, LGBTQ and women's rights, et cetera. And a pretty wide range also of types of clients, but still all those clients that are in that general social good ecosystem. And as a company, one of our main North Star goals that we are focused on is that we're trying to increase the amount of giving as a percentage of GDP in this country. So the term that we use is 3% by 33. So currently, charitable giving is below 3% of GDP, and our goal is to try to get that up to 3% by 2033.
Good. I saw your LinkedIn saying the greatest good. I think that's a very great company and vision to work towards. So cool. So tell me a little bit of how big is your company, like a product organization, and how big is the product ops?
Product department, we're generally maybe around about 50 to 60 staff. Obviously that fluctuates a bit over time. Currently, the product operations team is three of us. That number is also fluctuated over time. I've been solo. I've been on the team when it was a bit larger, but we're at three people now. And so our focus is around process, around the tech stack, and also all the things that we can do to increase the effectiveness of the product team. And so we're often like the mouthpieces to the department of making sure that messages are getting filtered down, but also that leadership is understanding the concerns of the team as well.
Very good context. Thank you. And I noticed you say something, I want to double click on that. You said effectiveness of product organization. You didn't say efficiency, which is a great word to hear. So could you double click on a little bit of what do you mean by that? And then what are some of the key either outcomes or challenges towards that?
To get into that, if you don't mind, I'll explain a little bit about how Bonterra came about. Because that sort of led to the challenges that we had around efficiency and effectiveness. So Bonterra was actually formed out of a lateral merger. So rather than having a large company that acquired several smaller companies, instead our investment partners brought together four large organizations and decided that it made sense for us to be one company focused on this area of social good. The challenge with that is then you can't just say, well, this is the way we do things, and we need to teach all of you the way that we do things, because instead we each had our own way of doing things coming into that merger. So one of the challenges that we really had to focus on was what was the way that we could be the most effective as a product team, considering that our backgrounds and experiences were a bit different, the ways that we were used to working together, the tech stack that we're using were all quite different. And so that causes a lot of growing pains where you need to figure out, well, we could, pick and choose a little bit of this and a little bit of this, and maybe come together with one great process for everybody. But what we learned, I think, very quickly was that we have a complex structure. This isn't something that we just are choosing to fix. It's more, this is our reality, and we need to figure out a way to be efficient within that reality. So a lot of that then, I think, came down to being able to try things and pivot quickly. If something isn't working, to recognize within just a few months that it's not working and then immediately make changes. That obviously is going to create a little bit of challenge and tension for the team because you might roll out a process, for example, and then 3 months later say, so remember that process? We're going to change that again.
Right.
But what we were trying to continually emphasize along the way is we keep changing it because you are telling us it's not working. And so we need to find a better way for this to work. And eventually got to a place where it's working, but understood that it was not going to be a one size fits all approach. So it's more that we have a primary way of working, and there are slightly different flavors of that that are each of those individual product teams is going to be focused on.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It's quite unique as a company, relatively young, 4 years, 5 years, with a multiple company coming together. But we definitely seeing more and more of those growth through acquisition and the mergers, and that's definitely creating some challenges even within the same company. Different teams, depending on the types of technology and or type of
Mhm.
product, you may have a different process as well. Some of the areas of products are much smaller, iterative, and then they won't like long planning cycles and others. But then you have a platform team. Sometimes they do have to plan and line roadmap because they have to support so many different ones. They have to figure out how to touch a thing. So definitely seeing that. I like how you said that the process is a iterative, and I think that makes sense with so one of the guests, we were talking about how we treat a process as a product, and that
Mhm.
iteration and the
Yes.
users and the evolving things coming through, and that makes a lot of sense. What you also mentioned something interesting. Well, obviously, some of the things you have to keep unique because the companies and different groups in the culture. What are the things that you try to make it consistent or somewhat sort of across the board in different acquired organization and teams?
That's where I think if we just go, for example, with like the software development life cycle. So, the
Right,
basic key end-to-end process that we all focus on. For that, we eventually figured out that we would have to scale it back to where we had a, a couple key artifacts that were going to be documented for each effort that was going to go on the roadmap, and that we would have one or two key ceremonies that everyone would be participating in as a part of that.
right,
But then beyond that, then that's then where we needed to start to give teams more of that freedom to work within the way that was going to work best for their user base,
right,
for the product that they're working on. So rather than focus on, hitting specific numbers or doing, identifying a certain number of opportunities before you move forward, instead, going with what is going to make the most sense for your particular situation. But as long as we have a well-documented business case about why we're going to proceed with this, and that you've done the legwork internally to make sure that we've hit certain things that we are concerned about as a company, and that it is moving our vision forward for the company and for that product, then we can give you that more flexibility in the approach.
and I think definitely, sort of the balance of how much you want a portfolio-wide consistencies versus how much is the team autonomy so that you can achieve the goals in slightly different way depending on the team.
Right.
Sounds like that's what you're doing. So that's really cool. Now, putting that for a second, like obviously you say portfolios of different products, they have a different, target segments and they may work a little bit differently. So you're iterating different type of SDLC or PDLC, product development
Mhm.
lifecycle, either way, right? So that's like you can figure out the consistency versus autonomy, a variation. Now, what other challenges outside of this sort of the practice and process that you've either currently struggling or working on, or something that you had in the past and are now kind of found a solution forward?
Well, and it's very appropriate that I'm talking to you about this because the tech stack has been one of those really big challenges. And again, with first of all, when we became Bonterra, we were each using different tools for road mapping, for intake of customer feedback, and maybe for monitoring calls. And also, each one had their own instance of a CRM where they were recording all of the sales data. Um, So figuring out how we were going to align on that, because it is both impractical from just a data movement perspective to get data from all of those different systems, but also it's just not practical financially as a company. If you are a company of a decent size, then when you're negotiating contracts with tech vendors out there, it makes more sense to have everything consolidated and say, we, based on our needs, then for all of this, we need this level of service, or we need an enterprise level account, for example. So originally, that was a major pain point for us. When we first started with my team, I believe the number was that we had 36 different tech tools amongst all of us. And obviously, we were not going to pay for 36 going forward. So figuring out how we were going to whittle that down and then get the internal buy-in from everybody and then get everybody trained and get those contracts signed, get other contracts to close. That was at least a year-long process. We were eventually able to get that down, I believe, to less than 12 initially. So that was a huge win. But it's also an ongoing challenge because we continue to grow as a company and we have had a couple acquisitions in recent years. And then they, again, will bring in their favorite tools and things that they like. And, maybe somebody says, we love Dragonboat, or we really love to use Gong, or whatever it is. We need to be sensitive to that. And the first thing that my team will usually do is do that initial inventory, find out what are they using. If they're using a tool that we already have, then we'll go to our vendor and have a conversation about how do we maybe consolidate onto one account. But if they're not, then we will have conversations with them about, well, for each of these, what do you like? What do you hate? What do you wish that you had? And then we can figure out maybe if what we have will meet those needs, or maybe it doesn't currently. And in some cases, we might decide to keep on one of those vendors for at least another year to say, we're not quite ready to cut the cord on that yet, but we need to have a vision of moving you off of that platform within a year. So let's figure out how we're going to get to that point. I do think it's been really critical because, particularly when you look at a system like Pendo or Gainsight, for example, where you're using it for a number of different things, the internal knowledge that is necessary to support that and keep it going and get people trained on it. It's not something that you want to just keep changing. So you really want to make sure that you're making the right decision and that once you made the investment, you are going to give it as long as reasonable, whether that's a year or maybe several years, to decide that that's going to be the best way to go. So yeah, that's it. It's part of what my team needs to focus on is this constant looking at tools that our new companies are bringing in, but also constantly reevaluating what we have. The tool that you're using now, maybe there's something better out there. Maybe that thing that you desperately wanted, that company over there in the corner now has it, and you need to give them another look.
It's interesting because earlier in my career, I was part of the M&A integration on a lot of products at PayPal. We bought a couple companies and ended up bringing some of them into our portfolio and a few others. And I think the method that you are adopting makes very much aligned with the best practices, which is to initially separate, but then you see how, because you don't want to disrupt the obviously the existing operation, but then you also want to make sure as fast as you can bring in the synergies and then reduce the duplication. So the thought of the people and the knowledge, expertise along with the tools makes a lot of sense. And a lot of times you also think about how do you parallel track so that as you move the new tool into consolidated, then that you don't lose that. So that's really cool that you have a very thoughtful process going along. The other part, I think it's interesting that the implied is the data underlying it, right? Because it's not that just the tools that they cost money, and every tool has their own setup, every tool has their own sort of taxonomy or nomenclature. But once you start have a few of them, they start to speak different languages. And then
Right, exactly.
even if you try to, right? So I think when it comes to practice itself, like you said, PDLC, SDLC, there are reasons to keep that slightly different, autonomous, because the reality of how their customer segment work. But on the other hand, that the underlying data of your business, regardless of customer and a product or decision and strategy, that does need to stay in one way, right? So not just sort of you have all these hubs and then you try to download data into one thing, but then it's not real time, it's not contextual. So you lose all that stuff. So that makes a lot of sense how you think about it. Now, and also like how you think about it, you make it decisions on, you know, both the best practices, internal knowledges on that. So it's pretty fun thing to hear. Um,
Mhm.
when you have these teams from different areas, and they probably not at a different, they probably at slightly different stage or segment or product maturity or others. How do you think about your portfolios overall? And then what are some of the challenges and or tips that you manage across this variety of the uh, portfolio?
I think this, to me, also it gets back to the flexibility piece again. As we look at our portfolio, we need to think about how mature each product is, and therefore what are the needs for each of those products. And so, two very contrasting examples. We have a couple of our products which have been around for 10, 15, 20 years. So there is some old legacy code sitting in these products, and just trying to make some improvements and updates for a variety of things. Like accessibility is a great example. Like, you know we weren't thinking about accessibility in the same way 15 years ago as we are today. So just trying to figure out those things that these older products need and how much more time it will often take to make those changes, not just in the sense of coding it, but also bringing a loyal long-term customer base along and saying, we're making these changes for your benefit, and this is why. So you sort of have to internally sell your customers on why it's a good idea. And then you contrast that with some of our newest products where we're basically working in green space, and teams are working in a very AI driven way. They are doing things like 1 week sprints, and just getting like rapid feedback, making rapid changes. And so those product teams are operating very, very differently. Um, one of them, it's quick, it's fast, it's experimental. They can get quick feedback, they can quickly pivot. And then again, on the other end, you've got teams that need to really understand the customer base well, understand what the non-negotiables are, and understand just sometimes how long it's going to take to make updates. Again, I think that's where that flexibility comes in, is we need to be able to support both of these teams, but also agree that we're going to have one general way of working across all of us.
What is
And
the one general way of working?
I think it comes down to, we want to make sure that things are well documented, that they are going to meet the vision that we have set forward for the product or the company, for the year ahead, and that it is a good financial decision for us as a company. That we're not just thinking about this is what the customers say, but this is also a wise move for us as a company. So just sort of having those few key uh, pillars, if you will, that are going to hold it up. Everything in between then can be a lot more flexible.
Right. You have this multi-factor around, so that not just North Star, right? You have a set of the North Stars, thinking about the companies,
Right, right.
about the customers, and think about alignment with strategy and vision. And then you would say, how do we get there? Will be more flexible as long as it makes sense. How much of your teams, different product areas, have dependencies, if at all?
The majority of them have pretty heavy dependencies right now. And again, a lot of that is coming from just products that have been around for quite a while. None of these were really in that like startup phase, scrappy startup phase. These have been around and have a a loyal client base. And so there are those dependencies, but also depending on the product, we also have some unique dependencies. We're in a healthcare space, so we need to think about HIPAA. We've got governmental agencies we have to pay attention to, state governments, as well as federal governments. Again, on top of that, then you have not only the dependencies you're worrying about in the product, but also regulatory dependencies that we have to pay
Sure.
attention to.
That definitely makes things more interesting.
Yes, for sure.
And as
Never a
you
dull day
grow,
around here.
as you grow, then that probably even coming more so with all the other newer acquisitions, others. So how do you operate today? You mentioned some of the teams take a longer time to plan and some teams to fit quick, like 1 week sprint. Now you also have this dependencies for a lot of teams. So how does this come together? Do you have some sort of the cadences across your organization, regardless if you're setting vision and strategy and then roadmap or portfolio alignment? What kind of cadences do you do today?
We are always focusing on things just on a quarterly basis.
Yep.
And so just internally, once a quarter, we're really looking at, where is the business? Where should we be going with each of these? Are they on track? Um, And these are laddering up to a few major goals that we focus on as a company. We set those goals often on an annual basis. And so then throughout the year, that will then cascade down into goals that we're going to focus on again just for a quarter or two. As a result of that, then I think we're always looking at the roadmap um, in those ways. And we will now once a quarter um, basically show off the roadmap to the rest of the staff. So the company understands that uh, because we are trying to lead as product, we want you to understand what are the decisions that we're making about the future, where are we headed, what's coming down, what can you get customers excited about if you're in a customer facing role, or if folks working in engineering understand like this is where we're headed, and so these are areas of the product that we're going to be focusing on. Great. Good to know. But beyond that, within the department, we have a weekly ceremony that we do, which we call Launchpad and Landing Pad. And it is basically a chance for pods to pitch, this is why we think something should go on the roadmap. This is what we heard from customers. This is why we think it's important. This is why we think it fits our business goals. This is why it ladders up to the goals that we have for the product. And this is why we think we should do it. It gives them an opportunity to get feedback from the CPO, from the CTO, have them just sort of flag any areas that maybe would require a bit more investigation, or I I'm not totally sure about that financial goal. Can you check with so and so about this to make sure that we're on the same page? And then pods come back after 2, 3 months for landing pad to report on the metrics that they said were going to be their measures of success when they brought something to Launchpad initially. And so what I like about this is it provides great visibility within the department. So no one is sort of working in a vacuum.
Right.
We understand what is going on the roadmap, just even within our department, and product folks and engineering folks are always welcome to attend these. Beyond that, it's great skills for the people that are presenting. I mean, it's defending why you think something should go on a roadmap. That's something every product manager, UX designer, like I think they need to be able to lead with that sort of conviction. It also gives that visibility of folks to say, hey, now that's a good idea. Should we be doing that in our product over here too? Or, well, you're talking about building a report in this way. Did you know we already have this thing that maybe is going to do part of what you want to do? Maybe we should have our tech leads talk to each other about that. And I think this has been particularly important in the past year as we look at some of the more AI-driven features. of, people are coming up with cool models to work with. And it's like, well, that model, like we could adapt that model. Maybe we could put that over here and we could come up with something cool that could do this, even though it's going to do a different thing in the product. It's based on that same idea. And so it is that easy information sharing. When you're like a product team our size, where we're not really small, so we're not seeing each other every day, but we're not so huge that we're this global conglomerate of thousands of product staff. We're like 50 to 60 people. So we all know of each other and we can share ideas pretty easily, but it just gives us that easy way to make that connection.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We've definitely seen more of those because as you extract, regardless is the business context, customer context, those often are shared. So being able to reuse it, like your example of models or tools that can be used by different teams and product makes total sense. And having that connected tissue or connective tissue of knowledge in the context, having people together, definitely, well, ideally also have something to look at and then over time to learn and grow on top of it makes a lot of sense. So, and it's definitely good practice. Looks like you solve a lot of the challenges and a lot of, so are there anything left? Like any challenge
Uh,
left to be solved and what are they?
First one I would say is about scaling. I think once you get to where everything is sort of even keel, we kind of figured it out. We figured out a way that we're working and we're making it work. But if we're going to keep growing, everything we do needs to scale. One example of this for my team is we are owning that tech stack. But as I mentioned, we are a team of three. And there's only so much that we can do to help troubleshoot the many challenges that some of our colleagues may have. And an example is we use Pendo, and we're not the only team using Pendo. We've got a number of client-facing teams using Pendo, sales, our marketing team. So you have so many different people in there, but technically, like we own that. And I can't, as much as I wouldn't mind maybe just being like a Pendo troubleshooter all day, that is quite frankly not what I'm getting paid for, and it's not practical. So we need to find ways that we can still be supportive, but be able to grow. So one of the things that we hit on this year is that we created some custom GPTs to basically be that first line of defense. And so thinking of it less of like, oh my God, I'm going to a website and here's another annoying chatbot that I have to deal with before I can do what I want. But it is helpful in the sense of I shouldn't have to spend any of my time telling somebody how to get a login for Pendo.
Yeah,
Like that is written down and somebody should be able to find it. But
right.
in this day and age, people are not always, hip to go search through documentation to find these things. Whereas with this bot that we have, it's had hundreds of conversations where it can say like, I can tell you exactly how to get one. Here's what you need to do. You need to file this ticket, do this, and then this will happen. If you already have access to this, you can get, and so it can answer those easy routine questions that come up week after week. So it's let us be able to do just a lot more um, impactful work and not a lot of that busy day-to-day thing, which I think a lot of us say is that's one of the beauty of AI these days is being able to help with those
Right.
routine day-to-day tasks.
Right. It's the internal support. It's very great to see some of those being in practice as well. Other than that, when you say scaling, obviously there's the tools, usage tools, and then that. This is really cool, like internal tooling support. What are other elements of the scaling you're seeing the challenges and how you think about solving them?
For me, 2026 is going to be the year of um, getting data to talk to each other from different systems. And I think like a number of companies, we do operate an internal data warehouse, which is very helpful because then that way we can be feeding in data from a number of different systems into there. But then that requires some skill or, doing good SQL queries to be able to get to the specific bits of information that you need. I think where we are headed is a direction of being able to build some connections between these systems that are smarter and don't require that level of technical knowledge. So one example, a tool that we've been experimenting with is called N8N. And it is a lot about saying, okay, I am going to initiate an automation that is going to go do this. It's going to look for this. Then it's going to go do this in this other system and then return this information. And I'm going to let you do all of this within a chat interface, for example. I think connections like that is where we want to go. I'm hearing several companies out there are now building their own MCP servers, which I think is going to unlock a lot of potential because really it's that democratization of data is this is all data we know we have, but I need that data out of Salesforce. I need that data out of Pengo. I need this data out of Gong, and I need to be able to get those things to work together and talk together. And it's going to require some effort, but I think the tools are evolving so quickly that this is going to not be so hard, I think, even in a year or two.
Yeah, this is really cool. And it's definitely we've seen that the regardless of product ops or rev ops, a lot of ops roles is that they move from a sort of the process slash workflow and then to sort of slash workflow to data and a context. And I think that's really important. I think one of the things that we talk about the some of the challenges team facing is that sure, I have an internal data warehouse. Sure, they have the data. But when I make decisions, I have to go there to create data and make a report versus that is in my
Right.
context. That is definitely something we see more and more. So think about everyone has their own sort of the main lens of operating focus or your main window, right? So if you're an engineer, you probably have your IDE, you're there. Maybe you can use the NCP to find MCP to find something about a customer or whatever. But if you're a PM, you do have a PM context window, and God forbid, hopefully that's not Jira because that's, too much at work.
Right.
But the
Right.
point here is that as a PM window, you do want to make sure those contexts are coming in, customers and feedbacks and delivery and the metrics and those window coming in that would actually make you making a lot of good decisions like how you say it, right? The data, free our data, have the APIs.
Exactly. Free that data. That's I think my phrase of the year. Because I don't want product managers to be spending their time figuring out how to write complicated SQL queries to get to helpful data to do what they want. I just want them to be able to grab the data so that they can then match that up with customer insights and create great products. Although we want very like AI comfort, fluent PMs, again, I don't think their focus needs to be on those in the weeds problems of how to pull the data out.
Right. Share the services so the PMs can actually solving PM problem, which and regardless of AI or not, you can never go away. You still have to understand the customers. You still have to have that magic of the user
Right?
experience,
Right.
customer experience. That's just a product management, right? So that's the cool part of it. By the way, you're also doing product management. The magic moment is for your users who are product managers or stakeholders getting what you produce, right? Regardless of the data or reports or communications, updates, and roadmaps. So that's really great to hear. So as we're wrapping up, if you were to say kind of the conversation so far, our goal is to say, you know, either your insights or learning or tips to people running product organizations that focus on customer outcomes. What is this one thing you think are really important and critical that we would focus on? You would focus on, recommend people to focus on?
That consistency is not the same thing as clarity. So again, thinking about what is going to make things clear for staff internally to understand the decisions that product is making is more important than a consistent way of getting there. And I think in product ops if we get too obsessed with a consistent way of doing things and uh, being Hannah Waddingham in Game of Thrones and doing the shame bell and saying, shame, you're not doing the process, shame. That's not the important part. The important part is that there is that clarity and that people understand the decisions that are made, why we're making them, and why they're the right decisions. And again, the way to get to that clarity and get that good decision making is based on being able to access good, solid data to be able to
Wow,
move forward.
like you're speaking exactly what we speak at a Dragonboat, by the way. Like we almost speak the same thing. So great. Awesome
Yes.
to hear and great to hear your journey. And I really love how you help your product teams getting the data and then making decisions, having different tooling talk to each other. The other part is like a very practical to say, okay, we have the outcome we try to accomplish as an organization. And then we know we get to this outcome maybe different. Different teams have different needs, or maybe they coming to the portfolio relatively new, have a different practice. So how do we come in? I really like those are really golden nuggets on how to run a product organization effectively, not just efficient, effectively and at scale. So thank you so much, Jason. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Becky. I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk to my friends over at Dragonboat, and I'm always happy to connect with folks that want to talk about product ops. I think we're process people that love to geek out on that together. Um, so if there's anybody out there listening, please feel free to connect with me because I love to chat.